Definitely on the toasty side here in Durham, North Carolina. Definitely it's on the warm side, but apparently it's on the warm side around the country and around the globe. So folks that say that global warming doesn't exist or any of those things, I think the temperatures are proving them definitely wrong. So definitely we're seeing a lot of temperatures and definitely on that high side, I think we're around 90 or something like that. And definitely supposed to be warm for a few days here in North Carolina. So we'll see how this all plays out and all of that. Going to see what guests show up on this particular edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. Of course, we've got Mullins music and memories coming your way later on, but of course, we've got all kinds of great and amazing conversations, and hope that folks will be joining in and hearing what's going on in the world and all of that. One of the stories that I had seen earlier today was about some New York lawmakers who said they were surrounded, beaten with bicycles, and pepper sprayed by the police during a Black Lives Matter protest in Brooklyn last year. And they have filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city on Monday, adding to the blizzard of litigation over the police department's conduct during the protest. The suit from State Senator Zelnor Myrie and Assemblywoman Diana Richardson accuses the police of violating their free speech rights, assaulting them, and illegally detaining Mr. Myrie. It names Mayor Bill de Blasio, Police Commissioner Dermot F. Shea, and six individual officers as defendants. The experience was a painful and humiliating reminder that following the rules and complying with police orders does not protect Black Americans from police brutality, not even Black Americans who have ascended to elected office, the suit states. Both lawmakers are Black, although the suit does not accuse the police of singling them out because of their race. The lawsuit comes on the heels of one filed by the state attorney general in January, demanding a court appointed monitor to oversee the policing of future protests, a class action suit filed on behalf of protesters, and preliminary court papers filed by more than 400 individual protesters. The city faces the possibility of millions of dollars in payouts. The lawmaker's suit asks a judge to declare tactics that they say the police used against them to be unlawful, including using bicycles to batter protesters and surrounding protesters so they cannot disperse, and then pushing in from all sides to arrest them, a technique known as kettling. The suit by the state attorney general Letitia James had made similar requests. The lawmaker suit also seeks unspecified damages. According to Nick Palacci, a spokesman for the city's law department, and this is a response that he gave earlier today, the NYPD has a long-standing track record of successfully protecting the right of the public to protest while ensuring public safety and is committed to strengthening those efforts. We will review these claims. The police in New York have faced widespread criticism for responding to protests against police brutality with violence last May and June during the nationwide demonstrations that followed the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. There were more than 2,000 arrests in New York. Video after video shows officers, including white shirted commanders, punching, beating, and shoving protesters, often without apparent provocation. So the city Department of Investigation concluded that many officers violated protesters' civil rights, and Mr. de Blasio personally apologized for the police conduct. Only a handful of officers have faced significant discipline. The police have said that more than 400 officers were injured during the protests, including 260 who were hospitalized, and that protesters caused more than $800,000 in damage to police vehicles. Mr. Myrie and Ms. Richardson, who both represent parts of Brooklyn, took part in a protest outside Barclays Center on May 29th, the first evening of widespread demonstrations that were taking place there in Brooklyn. To make himself easily identifiable, Mr. Myrie wore a neon green shirt with Senator Myrie on the back in block letters, according to the suit. Just before 8 p.m., the police announced that they were shutting the protest down. The suit says the officers kettled the crowd, without warnings, lifted and slammed their department issued bicycles into protesters, including the lawmaker, hitting Ms. Richardson in the abdomen and pelvis, and Mr. Myrie in the back and legs. When Mr. Myrie asked why the officers were hitting him and other protesters who were trying to follow the officers' instructions, the officers did not respond verbally, the suit says. Instead, they continued to ram him with the bicycles. It looks like this is definitely going to be a case that we'll be hearing about for a while and all of that. And it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that regard. So definitely we'll be paying attention to that, as I know a number of other people around the world will be also. So we'll be keeping an eye on that particular situation and seeing what's going on in that regards. Definitely, sports is going on for one thing in regards, and I did watch some of the games. So definitely the game between Phoenix and the Clippers, and that is definitely a rough mountain that the Clippers will have to dig out of if they're going to get out of this and everything, because they are down 3-1 to a very good Phoenix team. Milwaukee took a lead of 2-1, so we're going to see how that plays out also, because they're up 2-1 with the Atlanta Hawks, and we'll see if they can pull off a victory and not fall down 3-1, because if you fall down 3-1, it's pretty much over in my mind and all of that. But we're going to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that regard. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of stories come out of the NBA as well as other sports leagues as well. I understand that some of the players, including, I believe, Serena Williams and others, have already opted out of the Olympics. I think Steph Curry is another one that is opted out as well. So we're already seeing some of our athletes are opting out of going to the next Olympic Games and all of that, probably because of maybe the new variant, or also just because of their own wanting to protect their family and their safety and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that regard. Job searching during the summer can be a bit of a roller coaster, especially now. Businesses are increasing operations in many areas, but recruiters and hiring managers will also likely be taking time off. Job search experts offered their thoughts in the latest edition of Get Hired, or what job seekers should focus on over the next few months. They suggest keeping your job search going so you don't lose ground, reevaluating and possibly recalibrating your job search strategy, and taking time to invest in yourself by taking breaks. So definitely that's something that a lot of times we don't do enough of. We don't do enough self-care, as I've heard people talking about it throughout social media. So definitely self-care is a vital part of what we need to do, including when we're having that stressful time of job hunting and all of that. So I've had the privilege of having a couple of folks on that are in that space about self-care, and have definitely enjoyed my conversations with them. And hopefully they'll be coming back, some of them on upcoming editions, or maybe we'll just have them join us in other conversations. But definitely self care is very vital to all that we do. Another news in the job market is they're saying the summer of churn for the job market, while faster growth is powering demand for workers. Lingering constraints promise a choppy return to the labor market in coming months. Bloomberg reports the dynamics disruption of immigration and travel is depriving the hospitality industry of its usual influx of workers, for example, while enhanced jobless benefits allow still others to be more discriminating about the jobs they take, against a backdrop of continued childcare and health challenges. Economists forecast that the U.S. jobs report for June on Friday will show slightly faster payroll growth of 695,000. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Keith Chapman, an editor at LinkedIn News, says the debate over whether extra jobless benefits has kept workers away rages on. Early evidence suggests that in states where extra benefits have already been cut, people are applying for more jobs, but not necessarily taking them. And then they were also asking, and I guess I can ask it as well, what do you think the effects of ended extra benefits early will be? And how soon do you think it will be before people go back into the job force and go back into the jobs that they were used to and all of that? So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what's going on in that regards. As I've mentioned before on this show, hybrid work is definitely becoming very popular. We're having a lot of conversations around hybrid work, and hybrid work allows employees to split their time between the office and some other workspace. But who said it has to be their homes? Over the last year of remote work, third workplaces have become workers' go to spots, including coffee shops, co-working spaces, and even hotels. These alternative work environments are not new, but they're gaining popularity because they help with work-life balance and are mostly distraction-free. That's right. They're mostly distraction free. And I've actually been in a couple of those environments, including like some coffee shops. Not so much lately, because lately has been a lot more of stuff at home, even to work from home. But definitely, I do know quite a few people that have made it their point of running their businesses almost from their coffee shops and definitely some of the other things that are out there as well. As a matter of fact, Douglas Busk, who is a marketing and communication leader, said on LinkedIn, $25 to chill and work in an excellent outdoor workspace with unlimited coffee for an afternoon. Sign me up. So he definitely mentioned that Axios mentioned a restaurant in New York City by the name of Kindred doing just that. Brilliant move that he hopes spots in Atlanta adopt as well. So we do have people that are using their skills, whether it's coffee or whether it's good food or whatever, to entice people to come in, even if they don't want to go all the way to work. So they might be wanting to go to like a restaurant, a coffee shop, or something like that, but not want to go into the work environment. And that is definitely what a lot of people have been looking into as we have more and more people doing that age old pivot. So we're going to see how the pivot plays out and what folks' thoughts are on that as well. By the way, if there's things that I'm talking about that you're interested in, if you want to share your thoughts and everything, don't hesitate to write in a comment. You can do it in LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or wherever. You can also send an email to me at bluesradio@gmail.com. That's bluesradio@gmail.com. By the way, they're saying that there is a new test of ways you can identify yourself and all of that. So, in terms of blood type, so this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out because apparently there is a blood test that is detected cancer types, and we know that a lot of times people are looking at their blood, whether they're the O type or the A type or whatever, but apparently they're talking about some other things to do with blood tests that will detect cancer types. So, new research shows a simple blood test that can spot more than 50 kinds of cancer is accurate enough to be used on those who are high risk, including the asymptomatic. The paper, published in the Annals of Oncology, shows that the test delivered a very low false positive rate while predicting where in the body the cancer is located with solid accuracy. The test looks for chemical changes in pieces of genetic code called cell-free DNA that leak from cells into the bloodstream. Researchers say researchers say existing tests are still important since cancers such as prostate shed less DNA. And we do know just from history that prostate cancer can be something that we need to be aware of and testing on a regular basis and all of that. So definitely, if you haven't had your prostate cancer test, do that. And also, if you're a lady and you haven't had the breast cancer, I would urge you to do that as well, because definitely there are certain cancers that are more common than others, and we definitely need to do our part to get tested and all of that. Matter of fact, one person that is a author of Think Future and Quantum AI by the name of Frank Feather. He said that a simple blood test that can detect more than 50 types of cancers before any clinical signs or symptoms of the disease emerge is ready to be rolled out. So he was mentioning what they were talking about. And he says the test, which uses AI machine learning, is aimed at people at higher risk of disease, including patients ages 50 or older. And he said it is unable to identify many types of disease that are difficult to diagnose in the early stages, such as head and neck, ovarian, pancreatic, esophageal, and some blood cancers. So definitely, folks need to get out there and get those tests as well. I know a lot of people are paying attention to the vaccines and the rollout of the vaccines, and very well so. But we don't want to leave out some of these other things that are out there as well. They can also be very life threatening and all of that. So definitely keep that in mind. Try to keep yourself healthy. Try to keep yourself in that healthy time frame and healthy space, because we definitely want you to be as healthy as possible. That is always something that we wish for here on podtv.tv. You know, some people were wondering whether taking a burnout break actually helps. So this is an interesting story and an article. They were saying that some of these different companies are doing different things. So definitely dating app Bumble is the latest employer to grant its entire staff a week off in order to address what one senior executive described as collective burnout. Yet a health psychology professor writes in the magazine The Conversation that the gesture is a temporary fix unless employees couple it with well meaning initiatives that address the root causes of burnout at all levels, from individual workers, teams, and managers to the full organization. In Bumble's case, workers already had access to perks such as choosing their own hours and a glam room at its Austin headquarters before getting the extra time off. Hope Corrigan, who is a writer and definitely involved in a lot of things, said that a few weeks ago, court reporter Sarah Todd made the case for a week long company wide vacation. Companies such as LinkedIn, Mozilla, and now Bumble are already experimenting with pressing pause collectively. So, even though you just now maybe got back into the work environment, there may be some work environments that are wanting you to get back out of it. So, we're just going to play it by ear and see how these things play out and what goes on in that regard. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens and what folks have to say about that and all of that. So, we're just going to keep our eyes on these things and see more and more companies don't try to have that happen. As a matter of fact, Sarah Todd writes that the concept emerged as a particularly appealing idea in the pandemic as employers confronted the problem of rampant burnout among their ranks. Another part of the story that the folks may be interested in is what Jacqueline Relke was saying. And Jacqueline Relke worked as an analyst at CIBC Capital Markets on the Toronto trading floor when she was 21. By 23, she was running a global sales team and worked 16 hours a day. Then she burned out and quit. Now she has her own consulting company, JW Consulting Incorporated, and the JW Method, a strategic advisory firm that specializes in growth and sales consulting for women. So that's just an example of folks that decided to go out and set out on their own. Because sometimes that's what you need to do is you need to set out on your own and all of that. So definitely some interesting follow-ups on that story and everything. As a matter of fact, Nicole Miller, who is a leadership specialist, said, I absolutely love this and hope more organizations pick up on this trend that employees' mental health and family comes before else. So she was actually giving a lot of praise to Bumble for doing what they were doing in that regards. And another company expert or company consultant, Barbara Boschart, said that employee burnout is a very real and serious problem. Good for Bumble for granting a collective paid week off. That said, employers must be mindful not to pile on the work and to make up for a lost week. That would defeat the entire purpose. So I definitely agree with them that that would defeat the purpose, and we don't want to have them defeating the purpose in that sense at all. So definitely just some of the news stories. I'll be bringing up some more. Matter of fact, I'm gonna bring up one more about work, and then we're gonna take a little bit of a pause for the cause and all of that. But in a recent survey of LGBTQ professionals by LinkedIn, 25% of the respondents say they believe they have been intentionally denied promotion and raises because of their identity. For those looking to come out safely and without repercussions, the Human Rights Campaign has suggested asking the following questions. Does your employer have a written non discrimination policy? Does it specifically cover sexual orientation and or gender identity and expression? Is there is there a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer employee resource group at your workplace? So one of the other questions they want you to ask is there a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer employee resource group at your workplace. Does your state or locality have a non-discrimination law, including sexual orientation and gender identity expression? Is your company ranked on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index? If so, what rating has it earned? And even though there was such a index and everything, but there seems to be indexes for all kinds of things out there. So definitely that's some of the things that they were saying you might want to pay attention to and all of that. Speaking of paying attention, we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about the condo situation. We did lose a lot of lives. I think it's over 10. And of course, there's many more that are missing at that horrible disaster that happened there in Florida. But right now, we're going to go and have a couple of breaks and let y'all hear things that are going on in our platform, including Talking Upstream and, of course, Sasha's 2 shows as well.
Labs to Go is your vaccination destination for students, teachers, nurses, or anyone wanting to get first-time, seasonal, and booster immunizations. We also offer titers to ensure you're immune to vaccine. At Labs to Go, there are no doctor orders or insurance needed. We can come to you because we are Labs to Go.
Get your vaccination at our office, or we can come to your business, school, or even go to your home. When you need to know, call Labs to Go.
I love to introduce somebody really awesome. He is a master of training other speaker, and he is a great speaker because I saw him speaking, and he hardcore. He looks like athlete. He looks like a fighter. But when he starts speaking, he speaks with a real warm heart and really touch people's heart and really fascinate people.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them or disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the one thing you cannot do is ignore them. Because they change things, they push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do.
Reuben West communicates by connecting with his audience when he presents and when he's sharing a key message. Being able to connect and communicate your instructions clearly is a masterful skill.
The ultimate professional. Reuben is a guy that not only teaches a message, but also demonstrates the message. He's helped me to craft my art, and I'm sure he'll help you to craft yours.
Very accomplished international speaker being able to just connect to any audience, no matter where they come from or what kind of people they are. He helps you and serves you in every kind of way to elevate you as a speaker, and I highly recommend him.
He is a people's heart connecting scientist with a using instrument of your voice and your appearance and your heart to touch people's heart.
His communication is unmatched. I'm Australian, he's American, and it really makes no difference as to our culture and where we have come from, because his message, the way he communicates it, is from humanity.
Find a way to take the next step. Thank you.
Well, that was interesting spots right there of some of the things that folks might be interested in, including a motivational speaker, as well as some of the other shows that exist here on the network and all of that. But we always love to keep you informed about a variety of things here on podtv.tv, formerly IBM TV, but definitely want to just make you aware of a couple of things. And don't forget, Barbara E. Smith will be joining us on tomorrow. So looking forward to having her on tomorrow afternoon. By the way, Juul is paying a $40 million suit to settle a North Carolina vaping case. The settlement is the first in a stream of lawsuits against the company, which has been accused of deceptive marketing practices that contributed to a wave of nicotine addiction in teenagers. So definitely looks like that can be a bad thing in terms of the way of having that company survive or not, but we'll see how it all plays out in the near future. Juul has agreed to pay North Carolina $40 million to settle the first of a spate of lawsuits brought by states that claim the company's marketing practices fueled widespread addiction among young people to its high nicotine e-cigarettes. The settlement was announced on Monday by Josh Stein, the North Carolina Department of North Carolina Attorney General. I'm trying to think of what Josh's title is, but the North Carolina Attorney General, who sued the company in May of 2019. In the agreement, the company denies any wrongdoing or liability. The consent decree requires Juul to sell its products only behind the counter in North Carolina stores and to use third-party age verification systems for online sales. The order also commits Juul to sending teenage mystery shoppers to 1,000 stores each year to check whether they are selling to minors. It also bars the company from using models under age 35 in advertisement and states that no advertisement should be posted near schools. For years, Juul targeted young people, including teens, with highly addictive e-cigarettes, said Mr. Stein in a statement. It lit the spark and fanned the flames of a vaping epidemic among our children, one that you can see in any high school in North Carolina. In a statement, Joshua Raffle, a Juul spokesman, said, "This settlement is consistent with our ongoing efforts to reset our company and its relationship with our stakeholders as we continue to combat underage usage and advance the opportunity for harm." So that's interesting. So we're gonna see what else is going on with the Juul case and everything. By the way, going back, it says that Joshua Raffle, a Juul spokesman, said that definitely that's consistent, and I can see where the corporation would say that. And the North Carolina complaint accused Juul of designing, marketing, and selling e-cigarettes to attract young people and of misrepresenting the potency and danger of nicotine in the company's product in violation of the state's Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. 13 states, including California, Massachusetts, and New York, as well as the District of Columbia, have filed similar lawsuits. The central claim in each case is that Juul knew or should have known that it was hooking teenagers on pods that contained high levels of nicotine. Some of the youth in the cases claimed serious harms, including possible lung damage and mood disorders. E-cigarettes and other vaping products were initially conceived to be a reduced harm alternative to combustible cigarettes, which are linked to the death of about 480,000 people in the United States each year. But Juul, which featured young, hip-looking people in its first advertisements, billboards, and social media, quickly caught on with teenagers and young adults who had never smoked. Although nicotine is not deadly, some research shows that it can impair the developing brain. A group of 39 attorney generals has spent the past 16 months investigating Juul for its marketing and sales practices, as has the Food and Drug Administration. Juul also faces other legal threats. The Federal Trade Commission is suing Juul, Altria, and related parties, seeking to unwind the 2018 deal, which gave Altria 35% of Juul. Altria, the nation's largest tobacco company, paid $12.8 billion for that stake, but has since written down the value of their investment to $1.5 billion. The commission says that the two companies entered into a series of agreements, including Altria's investment, that eliminated competition in violation of federal antitrust laws. The FTC also claims that Altria and Juul started as competitors in the e-cigarette market, but as Juul's became more popular, Altria dealt with a threat by taking its own Mark 10 e-cigarette off the market in exchange for a share of Juul's profits. Both Altria and Juul have denied the charges. There also is a multi-district litigation in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. That litigation consolidates cases on three tracks: personal injury, which includes plaintiffs claiming addiction, lung injuries, and other health problems; a consumer class action track, claiming the individuals paid too much for a product that addicted them; and a government entity track consisting of school districts and counties seeking monetary reimbursements for vaping-related damages. Investors in Juul, like Altria and other entities, are also involved. Depositions have begun, and the first case is scheduled to go on trial in February of 2022. So we're talking about 8 months from now. So about 8 months is when that is scheduled to go on trial. Beyond all the legal challenges, the company is awaiting the decision from the FDA on whether its products can even remain on the market. The agency must decide by early September whether Juul and other new tobacco and vaping products are appropriate for the protection of public health and can continue to be sold. So these things are definitely going to be interesting, and to see how this all plays out is going to be quite fascinating. So we're going to see how this plays out and whether Tim Scott and others will wind up being the voice of moderation, according to some. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Because, like I said before, there are definitely some of those on the extreme right, just like there are some on the extreme left. So it'll be interesting to see how many folks actually go more into that middle space, which is where I think most of the population is at. So it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that as well. So that's just some of the things that are happening in the world and everything. So definitely keeping folks informed, letting know what's going on, and hopefully folks will be interested in attending and checking out what's happening in that regard. So definitely, if you're watching and you want to join the conversation, always interested in having people join the radio show and have them share their thoughts about things that they might be interested in being part of within the conversation. So if you want to join and everything, I'll put on the link, and y'all can pop in if you're interested. If you're watching and you want to pop in, I'm always glad to have folks pop in and share their wisdom as well. So definitely, if folks are interested in popping in, all they've got to do is join right here and pop in right on that link and everything. So if you're interested in popping in and want to say your piece about various things that are going on, would love to have you join the conversation. But always interested in sharing some of my thoughts, some of my things that are going on in the world, and hearing what y'all have to say as well. So definitely a lot going on in the world, and I do try to do my part to stay informed and all of that. Of course, our sympathies do go out big time to those that were victims of the collapse of the building there in Surfside, Florida. You know, the current death toll is up to 10 people but there are more than 150 people that remain unaccounted for as they continue to look for both survivors and probably more victims as well. So officials have said that they have not given up hope as their rescue efforts stretch into the fifth day. But our prayers do go out to folks in that area. So, matter of fact, workers at the site of the condo building collapse in Miami were digging through the rubble, some with their hands, in an attempt to find survivors on Monday, even as the chance of success have steadily dwindled. Still, officials insisted that they had not abandoned the search and rescue phase, emphasizing that the operation was extremely challenging but ongoing. So they're still trying to find those missing people, and I think the amount that they have found victim-wise so far has been 10 and all of that. So definitely no survivors have been pulled from the wreckage of the Champlain South Towers in Surfside, Florida, since Thursday, the day that half of the 13-story building collapsed. More than 300 emergency personnel, including teams from Israel and Mexico, are working around the clock, and the Army Corps of Engineers has been called in as well. As a matter of fact, Jimmy Patronis, the state's chief financial officer and fire marshal, said that this is the largest deployment of task force resources in the state of Florida that's not a hurricane. The same amount of rescuers are on the ground, he said, as there were during Hurricane Michael, a Category 5 hurricane that struck Florida back in 2018. The challenge that they're dealing in there as well is the fact that there's been rain in that area also. So the rain has been definitely hampering some of what was going on, and hopefully they'll be able to do more and more over the several days and all of that. And hopefully we will find some survivors. At least that's the hope of many of us that are folks that are empathetic and consider ourselves to be folks that are spiritually minded or whatever. So definitely our thoughts go out to those families, and we definitely hope that they are able to find many, many more survivors. But definitely there's a lot of things that go in as they continue to deal with the situation. Matter of fact, the gentleman I was just talking about, as a matter of fact, sorry, a different gentleman, Ray Chadella, the assistant fire chief of operations for Miami-Dade Fire, was adamant that officials had not made the grim decision to move from search and rescue to a recovery mode. Still, he did emphasize the complexity of the efforts. This was not a matter of lifting one floor after another to look for survivors, he said, but of sorting through pulverized steel and digging through concrete boulders the size of baseballs. In other areas, rescuers have come upon large concrete areas that now require heavy machinery, a process that uncovered the 10th body. Calling it a perfect example of the situation that we're dealing with, Chief Chitella told of how one person on the search and rescue team tumbled 25 feet down the mound in full view of family members of the missing who had been invited to watch the rescue efforts. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, according to Chief Chitella. He discussed how cameras were being used in voids within the rubbles, in some cases where sounds had been heard. He cautioned that those sounds were not necessarily proof of survivors. It could be a tap, could be a scratch. It may be nothing more than some of the metal that's contorting. But he said all variables have to be considered before we make a decision to move to the next phase. So definitely look like they are still trying their best to find folks in that building. So hopefully they might even find some other survivors and all of that. There's even some questions about some of the structural damage that was going on as well. So according to some experts, clearing the site and identifying remains may take months based on similar efforts at collapsed buildings. While Floridians and viewers around the world were stunned by the suddenness of the collapse, there were warnings as early as 2018 of major structural damage that needed to be addressed, according to emails between a contractor and the condo's board. In those emails, which the city of Surfside had begun releasing, the engineer urged the board to repair cracked columns and crumbling concrete and estimated it would cost about $9 million. As of the collapse on Thursday, that work had not been done, but the board had taken out a loan of about $12 billion to do the work. Speaking to reporters on Monday, the White House press secretary Joe Paskey said President Biden would support an expansive investigation into the disaster, spanning multiple federal agencies, including the FBI. The mayor of Surfside, Mayor Burkett, insisted on Monday that officials would investigate the reasons for the collapse and get to the bottom of it, but he said that this was an issue for another day. For now, he said the priorities were searching for survivors and supporting the families of the dead and missing. And he also described talking with an 11 or 12-year-old girl at Champlain Tower South collapse site on Sunday night. He had seen her before and knew that one of her parents had been in the building. That night, she was sitting alone, looking at her phone. She was reading a Jewish prayer to herself, sitting at the site by where one of her parents presumably is, Mr. Burkett said. She wasn't crying. She was just lost. She didn't know what to do. By the way, the investigation into what may be the deadliest accidental building collapse in American history has just begun, but experts who have examined video footage of the disaster outside Miami are focusing on a spot in the lowest part of the condominium complex, possibly in or below the underground parking garage, where an initial failure could have set off a structural avalanche. Called a progressive collapse, the gradual spread of failures could have occurred for a variety of reasons, including design flaws or a less robust construction allowed under the building codes of 4 decades ago when the complex was built. But that progression could not have occurred without some critical first failure and close inspection of a grainy surveillance video that emerged in the initial hours after the disaster have given their first hints of where that might have been. The early examination came as the rescuers on Sunday spent a 4th day pushing through the enormous heap of debris created when half of the 13th story building fell away early on Thursday. So definitely, while a number of bridges, overpasses, and buildings under construction fail each year, the catastrophic collapse of an occupied building, absent a bomb or an earthquake, is rare, and investigators are struggling to understand how it could have come with so little urgent warning. One of the things that I would add to that, and this is just something I remember from a conversation that I had one time, is that I remember that they were doing some of these prefab kind of buildings even here in the Triangle area. And I was talking to one of the people that had been involved in that construction. And even he was saying that he was concerned about some of the buildings that were going up fast and in a hurry, even in this area. And this was, of course, before the pandemic and before a number of other things that have definitely been more pressing on our mind. I'll put it that way. But definitely you do sometimes have to wonder about the safety when folks are putting up some of these buildings and all of that. So hopefully on a nationwide level, we'll see more people examine how these buildings are put up, and maybe if there can't be some safety things that are even added to make these things less likely. Like I said, they do talk about how buildings and other things collapse. And I just remember that I was having this conversation at a bus stop with a gentleman that was involved in that field, and he was expressing some similar concerns. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out on the world stage and all of that. By the way, there are some amazing people here that always are giving great advice, including our good friend Barbara Smith. So let's check out what Barbara Smith is all about as well.
Hi, I'm Barbara H. Smith, known as the Masterful Presenter. If you could figure out a universal language, personality code that connects with potential client, how powerful would that be? I empower people to communicate better what they do, what they have, and what they bring to the table. People love to buy. I don't need you to sell it to me. I come in there with an intention, and that's what you're going to do going forward. You're going to go into networking events with intention.
I am here benefiting from the wisdom of Barbara Smith.
She gave so much information on how I can just excel in my business, and I'm taking it to a whole nother level.
I'm learning a lot that I didn't really know about my business.
The information that she's been presenting has been informative and helpful to me.
If you have not been in the presence of Ms. Holmes Smith, you need to make sure you do so. Her workshops are authentic. She comes with such training, and she just graces you with her presence, and she allows you to feel the experience like none other before.
Charles Gates here, host of Local Legislator Live at 11, where we air most Wednesday mornings at 11 a.m. on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live. We have two purposes at Local Legislator Live at 11. This is a new product that we're putting out, and I want to introduce it to you today. One is to help you become a more concise messenger. What does that mean? That means stop rambling and being able to share your message and share that message with 12 words or less. Number two, be a better deliverer of that message. Deliver with power, deliver with energy, instead of sending people to sleep. If that is you, come see us, reach out to me at letstalk1031@gmail.com. We want to see you. Again, that email is letstalk1031@gmail.com. We've got the answer for you because we want to make you the best you can be. Come see us. Take care.
See, being in business, regardless if you're a non-to-business or any type of business, it's about connecting. It's about hearing new information that can drive you forth. It's more about coming together with people with like minds in order to make your business grow.
You don't wake up wanting to be mediocre and just do just enough. You want to excel. You want to be a master in your craft. You want to take it to the next level. So it's not going to happen by accident. So you have to be mindful and think of what can I do today to help take me to the next level.
The truth is, your life will only change when you get new information. Your life will only change when you move forward with another level of thinking. This expo is about new information and moving your life to another level.
Hi there, my name is Dr. Shayla Creer and I am the owner of Fist Mobile Physical Therapy.
Fully rehabilitate at home with Fist. PT's Total Knee Knockout Program. Bring the clinic right into your home as Dr. Creer takes you through 12 effective physical therapy sessions that completely rehabilitate the knee safely, efficiently, and effectively. The program is structured with custom exercises to target the muscles necessary to promote healing and get you moving. Get the entire program for one low price.
And anyway, as a result of the accident, I had to have 3 surgeries and 15 months of physical therapy 3 days a week in order to be able to walk again, to sit up by myself, and to be able to breathe again on my own. As you can imagine, it was not easy, but due to God first and foremost, and my wonderful healthcare team, I persevered and I pushed through. And I am not proud to say that it's been 13 years now, and I have no pain whatsoever. And I thank God that I'm able to share and pass that blessing on to you. So as you go through this rehab protocol, just know that it may not be easy, it may not be fun, but it will definitely be worth it. And I'm with you every step of the way. And I want you to know that if I can do it, you can do it. So let's go ahead and get started with this.
Well, it looks like almost every Tesla in what looks like, I was seeing it, if I'm reading the story correctly, in the area of China has been recalled. So definitely it says that more than 285,000 Teslas, almost every Tesla car sold in China, face a major recall after a Chinese government agency declared the electric vehicle's autopilot systems to be faulty. It is thought that the software can be activated automatically, potentially leading to crashes from sudden acceleration, per Bloomberg. The cruise control issue can be fixed remotely and will be done so for free by the company. Since opening a major plant in Shanghai, Tesla has faced several issues in the country. So definitely it looks like that's something that's going on and all of that. So it looks like they are in trouble with that, and we'll see how this all plays out and what else is going to happen with that, not just in China, but in other places as well. So definitely that's something that I'm sure people in the entire car market will be paying attention to and seeing how this all works out in that regards. But I'm trying to think if I'd ever heard of a situation where a car, almost every one that had been sold, had been definitely released and all of that. And I can't try to think of one. I mean, there might have been one, but it's not coming to my mind right now of that situation having happened in the past. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that regard as well. Speaking of things going on in the world, there is apparently a pandemic education revolution, and I might get to that if I haven't already. But then the other things that are going on is that apparently, like many industries, the startup economy suffered in 2020 after the start of the pandemic. In May of last year, courts predicted that 41% of startups would be out of cash within 3 months. So, how did this lack of funding impact startup founders? Well, apparently it impacted them through burnout. So, definitely a lot of those kind of folks were having a lot of burnout and things of that regard. So, it'll be interesting to see how that impacted a number of folks and all of that. Matter of fact, Samantha Robertson, who works with LinkedIn, said that when the pandemic hit, she remembers hearing about how tech startups were prevalent and still doing well. So hearing about a founder's experience in the media world is eye-opening. Every day I'm learning more about how the pandemic impacted everyone, no matter what your story is. And then another person, Dr. Thomas A. Parks, who is an entrepreneur and professor, was saying that the crazy amount of burnout that has occurred for entrepreneurs trying to struggle through COVID-19 is where creating a margin is a prerequisite for success. If entrepreneurs, managers, executive, and leaders don't live a life with margin, saying no, unplugging, taking vacations, being present with family, having me time, then their success is far less likely and almost certainly unsustainable. As a matter of fact, I believe they were talking about that earlier today when they had a young lady on Media Monday here on our network. And so definitely it sounds like some of this conversation is stuff that we might have even heard earlier in today on some of the programming that exists here on this powerful network. Sustainable success comes from a sustainable pace. If you can't run this way for the rest of your career, the occasional sprint excluded, then you will crash and burn is some of the other things that Dr. Parks was adding as well. And he also said that this usually happens when you can at least afford it. So I would agree with him on that and everything else in that regard. As a matter of fact, they also had a survey that asked the question, do you invest in your peers and mentees when they're raising unconditionally? And yes was what 27% said. Depends on the idea is what 54% said, and 20% said not yet. So it'll be interesting and all of that. And this was Siggy Sir, who is a founder and CEO of the Juggernaut, said that controversial but not so controversial idea. If you have the capital, one of the best things you can do is fund all your peers and mentees founding startups. You never know what will work out in the end, and people always remember the early supporters. It's important to bet on people. Don't overthink it. So that's one of the things that she was saying, and that's where that whole thing was about the investing, and that survey came around as well. So another interesting view on how the pandemic has impacted startup activities globally. Blockchain being the least, and travel and tourism the hardest. So apparently they're looking at some of the things that have been impacted, and it looks like if I'm looking at these infographic, how COVID-19 has impacted the global startup scene, it was a minus 14% for blockchain and crypto, a minus 19% for gaming, a minus 22% for social media and messaging, a minus 30% for AI and big data, a minus 39% for ag tech and new food, a minus 43% for automotive, and a whopping minus 59% for beauty and fashion. So that's just some of the things that I was seeing as I was looking around some of the news items that are out there in the public that I thought that y'all might be interested in and that I wanted to share with you in that regards and all of that. So definitely it's going to be interesting to see and all of that. So and when it comes to the pandemic education revolution. And by the way, I understand that this is the week of the spelling bee. So I think that we may be heading down to the finals of that, and I'll try to get some information about that. But I think that they've added some new categories to the spelling bee, because I think last year we had that 8-way tie, and they've added a speed round to try to get away from that 8-way tie, from what I heard in an earlier news report. But what Crisis have done is they have a special way of pushing otherwise slow moving institutions to embrace revolutionary changes in short order. There can be no doubt about that. And one of the places that they're talking about is the education system. So it's saying that the COVID-19 crisis has offered such an opportunity to the world's schooling system, according to The Economist. And I'm sure that my good friend Nick Palveda, one of the founders, along with Kim Calhoun of this network, will be glad to hear this. So while the abrupt switch to remote learning resulted in massive challenges for students, teachers, and parents, the shift also delivered some bright spots, according to The Economist. Parents and teachers began to coordinate more closely, and schools doubled down their investment in new tech. More than that, the crisis forces school systems to grow more comfortable with change, and attitude shift that could reap significant benefits in the years to come. So Paul Rebel of Harvard University argues that schools must move away from a factory model that provides every learner with similar lessons for a similar length of time, and move toward a medical model where it is assumed from the outset that learners will need varying kinds of assistance for different durations. That might include solving problems outside school that stop them from arriving ready to learn. A recent study found that 12 hours of tutoring could advance a young child's math skills as much as 3 months of conventional schooling. And I remember when I did some tutoring a few years back and everything, I did do some tutoring within that math space and everything. And hopefully I was able to help those young kids. And who knows, even though right now the company I work for is one that has done some tutoring, and I think still continues to do some tutoring when it's up and running. I have been more involved in the test grading, but who knows, maybe I'll get back in that tutoring space as well. Our personalized best, our our personalized blended models, school plus home, physical plus virtual, the best way forward in enabling us to have a better education. And it does seem that that is the direction that we're heading at in terms of how we're going to do schools and school education. So definitely we're seeing more and more people, including Ada Lanzaro Beaton, saying that schools must move away from a factory model that provides every learner with similar lessons for a similar length of time, and move toward that medical model. So definitely I'm agreeing with those folks that I think that we're going to have a hybrid model and all of that. And I'd love to hear from those friends of mine that are in the education field. And if relatives want to chime in and their thoughts as well, because I do know I have some family members that are in that education space, I would love to hear their thoughts about education as well, because definitely it's fascinating to have conversations with people about what they think is going on in the education space and how we can do better within that education space also. So I'd love to hear from anybody that's out there that is in that education space and would like to share their thoughts about education and what's going on in that area. Always glad to have folks give us their comments, give us their thoughts, and let us know what's on their mind in regards to education and the way that we're doing education at this particular moment and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody has any ideas on that, and definitely if they want to tell me their ideas about the Scripps spelling bee. At least I think that's still the way that it goes and everything. But yes, it's the Scripps National Spelling Bee. And like I said, I understand that that is going on right now. And we're going to try to have a winner and all of that. And of course, they've added some new categories. So they said that this year it returned with 209 spellers from across the United States and around the globe, all vying for the championship trophy. So they began to compete virtually about a couple of weeks ago. In the first 3 rounds of competition, the preliminaries, quarterfinals, and semifinals, and the top 10 to 12 spellers will be going down to the in-person finals on July 8th at ESPN's Wide World of Sports Complex at Walt Disney World Resort. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how that goes on and all of that. So we've definitely got some amazing folks. Matter of fact, there's somebody representing this area that apparently is still in the running and all of that. But I am seeing that as I'm looking at the finalists, one of them is from Charlotte, North Carolina, by the name of Threeson Gajelli, and that is a 14-year-old out of the Charlotte, North Carolina area and all of that. So that's one of the finalists. And we also have somebody representing Leesburg, Virginia as well. So definitely looks like there are some amazing finalists, and glad to see that we've got somebody representing New Orleans, and it looks like that they are being sponsored possibly by the Lynx. And I know the Lynx do some truly amazing things and all of that. So definitely it's great seeing that we've got some amazing folks that are competing and are definitely looking like things are going well in their regards. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing says meet the finalists, and I'm seeing like about 15 folks. So these might be the 15 finalists eventually and all of that. So those finals will be taking place on July 8th and everything along those lines. So I don't know if there's going to be some other competitions and everything, but definitely, that's right. It says that the semifinals were hosted on Sunday, June 27th. So that would have been yesterday and everything. So definitely these look like the true finalists that I am seeing here, and seeing some folks representing all kinds of parts of the world. So I see that there is a young lady that is representing San Francisco, California, two folks that are representing Texas, one from Waco and another from Austin. And then we've also got, like I said, the person representing North Carolina. So we're glad to see North Carolina is in the hunt as well. And we've got somebody representing the Bahamas. So I did see that there was somebody representing the Bahamas that was in the finals as well. And of course, we've got a lot of folks from Texas. So I see Fort Worth is represented, as is Dallas. Like I said, we've got somebody representing Illinois, and we've got folks representing New York. You know, New York's always going to at least give us one representative and all of that. And so we've also got another person representing Illinois as well. So I'm looking, and it looks like I said, like it's about maybe 15 finalists and all of that. So we're going to see how these folks do and everything, and which one of them will be taking the prize. I do understand that they've added some new components and all of that. So it'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that regards. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I have seen some of those words, and it's usually those medical words, because I've actually participated in some adult spelling bees. My good friend King Kenny has done some, and I think I did decent in one of them. Might have even finished in like the final 4 or the final 5 or something like that. But I can tell you, those medical words and those words with deep roots to their history, whether it's the French history or particularly the Latin history, those are the ones that get to me. So I would love to hear from my cohorts here and my fans here to see if any of them have been involved in spelling bees. And if they have been involved in spelling bees, how they did and what were some of the words that got them. You know, it's easy to go with the easy words like animal, Animal. See, even that word, I had to sit there and pause and do all of that. But animal, and that's an easy one. Or BEE, I mean, very easy. But you know, once you start dropping them medical words and things along those lines, yours truly, even though I love a word puzzle, so things like Word with Friends and even crosswords and cryptic quotes and things like that, I am not the best with those words that have to do with medical terminology and our words that have a Latin root and all of that. So I'm sure that a lot of folks would do a lot better than me. As a matter of fact, as I'm looking at the contestants, I am seeing that, as historically speaking, a lot of these finalists are coming from our Asian population and all of that, even though I am seeing a few that are representing other ethnicities, including the young lady from the New Orleans area, who is definitely representing our African American population, but quite a few that are having strong names that give us the idea that they could be from India or other Asian countries. So, love to hear your thoughts about the spelling bee, whether you ever competed in a spelling bee or whether you just thought that that was something that you were not interested in being involved in at all. So, I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about spelling bees and whether they have ever participated in such of these things as well. It's always interesting to hear what folks' thoughts are about spelling bees and a number of other things that are out there. I also understand that last week, and it might have been this past Friday, was apparently Take Your Dog to Work Day and everything. So, and I think that there is another one that is also Take Your Cat to Work Day as well. So, I would love to hear from folks here to see whether they've ever taken their dog to work or taking their cat to work, and if so, what their thoughts are about those days, or is it just something to add more hecticity to the work environment, or do you think those are good things to have as well? So it'd be fascinating to hear what folks' thoughts are about that and whether they like that idea or not. This whole idea of taking your pet or some other animal to work, or whether you don't even like those ideas. I know that there have been even cases where folks have had, like the take your cow to work kind of environments as well. But definitely, maybe in some cases with that situation, you might even be encouraging them to go into the same profession, or maybe you might even be discouraging them because you might not want them to go into that profession that was your profession and all of that, and you might be trying to find a way to discourage them from doing that. So I'm thinking that these things can be fascinating, and it might be interesting to see what folks have to say about that, whether they've even thought about taking somebody with them to their job environment and all of that, or whether this is something that they try to stay away from in any regards and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether you even want to take your child to work or not. So, or take your pet to work for that matter. So it'll be interesting to see what folks' thoughts are about that and everything else. One of the articles that I stumbled across, which is quite interesting, and it actually came back to something else that I was having a conversation with some acquaintances and friends of mine about, was this whole concept of about how more and more of our population, and some of this may be pandemic related, some of it may just be the nature of the way that society is going. But apparently, American women are having fewer children and having them later than ever before. A demographic shift being met with a whole lot of thought patterns from both the left and the right. So for conservatives, the fact that more women are putting off parenthood or foregoing it entirely is, I guess in their mind, evidence of the decline in traditional family values and all of that. It's not saying that this is something that I agree with, but that might be the way that some people frame it and all of that. Whereas some of those on the progressive side may be saying that birth declines are clearly tied to policy, with potential mothers deterred by having a lack of affordable child care, and the absence of universal health care and adequate paid parental leave and other basic support systems. So if you look at that and you also look at the skyrocketing housing, the cost of student loans, and the fact that in some cases wages have been stagnant for decades, then you can see why folks might be putting off having children and all of that. And then, of course, there's also the matter of how late can you have those children and all of that. So definitely they're saying that birth rates are declining among the women in their 20s, ticking up slightly among women in their 30s and 40s. And as the New York Times analysis found, decreasing the most significantly in counties where unemployment is growing. In other words, where employment is growing. In other words, the women who are driving this downturn are those who have the most advantage and the greatest range of choices and whose prospects look the best. So definitely it's going to be interesting to see how this all continues. And it says that while birth rates are dropping, the total percentage of women who are mothers has risen in part thanks to older women, college educated women, and unmarried women being more likely to have a baby than they had been before. Childbearing remains overwhelmingly the norm. 80% of American women ages 40 to 44 are are mothers. So they're saying 86% of women between the ages of 40 to 44 are mothers. So motherhood isn't on the decline so much as motherhood is delayed. And families with one or two children are ascendant. So definitely we're seeing more and more folks putting off having children till later in life and all of that. And waiting till they get their careers where they want their careers to be and tying that with their families as well. So definitely it'll going to be interesting to see folks' thoughts about these kind of studies and all of that. As a matter of fact, they say that women who plan their pregnancies wind up happier, better educated, and with less relationship conflict than women whose pregnancies were unattended, according to studies compiled by the Guttmacher Institute. The Institute for Family Studies found that women who have more children than their ideal are less likely to report feeling happy than women who had their ideal number and than women who had fewer children than they said they wanted. Women the world over are having fewer children and having them later. And countries where women have the most opportunity to pursue higher education, live independently, and work for pay also tend to have higher average age of first birth and lower birth rates overall. Despite the broad lack of social support systems in the United States, the average American woman has her first child at 26.4, a younger age than the average woman in any other developed nation. So definitely we're seeing that even in other parts of the globe, folks are definitely having children later and later in life and all of that. So this is going to be interesting to see how this all plays out and what folks' thoughts may be about this as well. So I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about this kind of rise of people either choosing not to have children or having them later in life and waiting to get their career off the ground and all of that. Like I said, I think I was in the middle of a clubhouse room and there was some conversations around that. Then I was also watching a gentleman on YouTube who apparently has somewhat of a history of baiting women into conversations, because I think part of his argument, and I'm trying to remember his name, it might have been something like Kevin Eubanks, but part of his argument was that some women are looking for a stepdad and not necessarily for their kids and not necessarily looking for anything else and all of that. So while it's not necessarily something that I totally can get with, and I was actually shocked when I heard those kind of remarks and everything, and I can understand why some people would accuse that particular person that has apparently a large following and all of that for being somewhat of a misogynist and all of that. So I can definitely understand why folks would get into that mindset and all of that, because he's had some interesting comments. And it's Kevin Samuels, by the way. That's the gentleman that I was trying to remember and all of that. So definitely I've watched a couple of his videos and some of them have gone quite viral, and he's had some interesting comments that he has made about a number of things. But I was watching one of them and it was like watching a train wreck. So, you know, you knew where he was going, you know what was being said, and you just couldn't help but watch the train wreck that was taking place. And definitely he had some viewpoints that I could not get with or agree with in the least bit. So definitely he had some very interesting views about the relationships that exist. And it was almost as if he was saying that if in some ways, he was almost saying like you know, why people were in toxic relationships, and it was almost like he was discounting the toxic relationship argument and all of that. But I would love to hear folks' thoughts about Mr. Samuels and some of the things that he has put out there, including this concept that you cannot be part of a toxic relationship, or if they're in one, it was almost as if he was telling one person that they need to stay in that toxic relationship and all of that. So he's had some very interesting views and all of that. He's definitely said some things about even some corporate women being average and all of that. So he's had some very interesting things that I have seen out there, and I would love to hear his people's thoughts about what he has said, even on some of his own YouTube videos and all of that. So, like I said, I don't know if I can agree with some of his viewpoints, but I would love to hear what other people think about him, because apparently he has gone very viral and has quite a bit of a following. So I'd love to hear what folks' thoughts are of Mr. Samuels and of his viewpoints about a number of things. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are about this YouTube hero, because definitely he's become somewhat of an influencer, or it's what some people may consider to be an influencer in that space and all of that. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about Mr. Samuels, as well as others that might be in that influence space. So I'd love to hear what folks' thoughts are with regards to that. So if you got any thoughts and you want to share them, don't hesitate to jump into the comment section. Let me know that you're watching. Let me know what your thoughts are about today, about how you're doing today. Because, I was actually knowing that we're all in that metamorphosis period. So sometimes we like to know how folks are doing just in general and everything. But right now, we're going to check out another show that is about investing here, which is done by our good friend Sasha. So I hope that you'll catch that show. And of course, it was on earlier, but we hope that you'll definitely check it on a regular basis. Well, we've been sharing a lot with you about a number of things that have been going on in the world, but I'm glad to see that a guest has arrived. So, glad to see Mr. Short and see what he's got going on in his world. So, always good to have some amazing guests join us and all of that. So, we're going to bring Mr. Short into the conversation and see how things are treating you in your world and in your life. So, glad that you were able to come in and join the radio show here on what is now called Pod TV, but we had to change the name and everything, but still very much active in the internet television space and everything. So I want to thank Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun for putting together this amazing network and getting folks to be able to share their stories, and always glad to have great guests that are willing to come in and share what their story is all about as well. So I'd love to hear more about Mr. Short, and definitely if you can let folks know how you're doing. I know a lot of folks have been concerned. We apparently are coming more and more out of the pandemic as more and more people are getting vaccinated. So I know I'm in the event planning space in addition to some other things that I do, and we're seeing more and more people that are getting out without their mask, getting out, doing a lot of other things in the community. So I would love to hear how you're doing and where you're doing it at.
Hi, Mark. How are you? Hope all is going well. Apologies. I don't know if I was supposed to be here an hour ago. I see the show's been going for an hour and a bit. Don't know if I was supposed to be here, and I just got my time zones wrong. So my name is Stephen. I'm from Dublin in Ireland. So the other side of the pond from you. Things here COVID-wise, we're there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm in the age profile that has gotten both jabs, so both Pfizer shots so far, and we're moving our way through the community. We have had still have numbers of new cases every day. So for Ireland, we have between 300 and 500 new cases every day. So you take that from a US point of view, that's nothing. You probably are able to get that in a suburb of a major city in the US. But in Ireland, they're fairly high numbers. But we have not had a death from COVID, I think, in about 2 months. And our ICU numbers have now dropped. So we were at the peak when we were in the middle of the third wave here in Europe. We had about 150, 180 people in ICU beds. And now we're down at about 15 people in ICU beds, and thankfully nobody's passed away directly from COVID in the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's great to hear that nobody has done that and everything. And like I said, we seem to be doing better, even though I know the president of the United States wanted us to get to, I think, a certain percentage that it doesn't look like we'll meet and everything. But it might have been one of those goals, you're into that leadership space. And I know that sometimes leaders set goals that they even know themselves aren't necessarily going to be attainable, because sometimes you want to set that goal because even if you fall short, you've at least got a lot further than you thought you would have, and all of that. So I was wondering, as we talk about leadership, because that's something that I've noticed that leaders will do sometimes, is that they will set a goal that they know is possibly not attainable. And I won't say he was going for like 70 or 75% or something like that, but your hope is that you make that goal. But if you don't make the goal, at least you put a significant dent in what is a serious problem, whether that's an internal problem within your company, or in this case, a world pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of that, what jumps to mind when you're explaining that situation, is a moon shoot. So you shoot for the moon, you aim for the moon, and even if you don't get it, you still are getting further than you thought you could have gotten before, especially if you thought previously that the sky is the limit. So why limit yourself to the sky? Shoot for the moon and go as far as you can.
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. What do you think is some of the things that folks are shocked about by some of the leaders? Because you've had a pleasure, and I definitely remember talking to you on our early kind of like pre-call and everything. But what are some of the things that you have been shocked by leaders? Because you've done a lot of work in that entrepreneurship, leadership development space, and of course, we've seen a lot of people even become new leaders. Because I know a lot of people are now looking at the gig economy and seeing more and more people developing their own business plans. Some people might call it the great pivots that are going on in the world as people are going more into an entrepreneurship space.
Or the great pivot, or the great panic. They say the two most common words that entrepreneurs hear before they become an entrepreneur is "you're fired." So that's how a lot of people end up going, "All right, well, there's nothing happening here. I better go do something for myself." One of the things that we see a lot, because in our leadership coaching and our family business coaching and things like that, we are more interested in. We're not so interested in your identity. From a business point of view and from a coaching point of view, we're interested in your reputation. So how you see yourself is not necessarily the same as how other people see you. And it goes back to the age-old thing of, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their actions. So understanding what your actual reputation is, and then being able to say, okay, there's things about my reputation that I don't really like, and maybe I can see how that reputation, how people can think of me in that way because my behavior has been this, this, and this. My intention was not to do that, but I can see how my behavior has led to that. That's when we can change. That's when we can grow. And that's when we can say, okay, either A, I like my reputation, I'm awesome, screw you, go home. Or you can say, yeah, you know what? I think I probably need to be a little bit more understanding, or I need to be a little bit less excitable, or whatever is the situation. So it's based on your reputation rather than your identity.
And speaking of reputation and identity, I know even with this platform, the International Broadcast Media Network and everything, that a lot of times we have folks that are always interested in the whole concept of investment. And I know a lot of people are very much interested in investment spaces, but I don't know, and I'm oftentimes shocked at the amount of folks that, one, either expected the investments are just going to automatically come, or two, that they are having this idea that they're going to be able to create a business without a business plan. Because I've seen a number of folks that don't even have a business plan, but then they automatically expect that like things are just going to automatically happen without having the blocks that you need in order to build. So I'm just wondering, in your own research, and you've been doing this for a while, is that something that you've seen quite a bit of, where folks are not as prepared as they should be, whether that's prepared to go after investors, or whether that's prepared to even maintain their business?
So again, a lot of the time, if we're talking about investors and going and getting, say, angel investors, or like pre-Series A, because if you don't have this mindset, you're not going to get anywhere near Series A unless you have a unicorn of unicorns, that people you just have something that everybody wants and nobody thought of before. more often than not, when I see pitches, either people pitching me or people who are just trying to get advice on pitching, it will come down sometimes to the valuation, what they bring to the table, the sunk costs that they've brought in, or I've been sweating on this for 3 years, and we have $100,000 or €100,000 in revenue, but because of all the time and effort I put into it, my view is that the company is worth $5 million. So if you give me 100,000 now, that's the percentage you're going to get. I'm not valuing what the investor is bringing into it. And again, to me, that comes down to, again, reputation versus identity. So how I see the company is here because I have my unconscious biases or my conscious biases on how good my business is and how good my idea is and what an awesome executor I am. Whereas the actual reputation is, look, people are not buying from you at the moment. Something is wrong, either the messaging, the product, the pitch, whatever it is. So your reputation is not the same as your identity.
Yeah. I want to come back to what I mentioned earlier because I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who is originally from New York, if I remember correctly, and everything. But now he lives in Dubai or spends most of the time in Dubai. And he does a lot of people that are always looking at him with, trying to get him to invest in this or that. And one of the things that he's always shocked at is that they have these great ideas, but they don't even have like the basics, a business plan and things along that line. So even in that entrepreneurship space, do you think that it is the norm for most people that have the tools that they need, like a business plan, like an accounting plan, or like even a vision board and things of that nature? Or do you think that many people just kind of go into it without having those kind of things that they need to have from Jump Street? Because like I said, I know that he was talking about how, family friends of his may find out that he's got this investment or this resource or that resource. So they would pitch him about this or that, whether it was a barbershop or a club or a automobile dealership. And I'm just using those as examples. And then, of course, he being a good business person, his first question would be, do you have a business plan? And they looked at him like he had said a foreign word.
So yeah, I mean, from a startup point of view, and I've seen a lot of pitches. So I've been involved in student entrepreneurship and accelerator programs for many years globally. What I've seen a lot, and you said the word pivot earlier on, a lot of people have a business plan and they don't have the experience. And I think Mike Tyson once famously said, everyone's got a great plan until you get punched in the face. So you've got to actually go do it, because plans and forecasting, you're just picking out numbers and what you think is going to happen. So you have to have a little bit of experience. You have to have a little bit of skin in the game, to a couple of scars, to actually be able to say, okay, maybe 1 million people are not going to pay me €1,000 to post on Instagram because nobody knows who I am. So having the ultimate plan, so long as that plan is flexible enough to change, really, for me, what's more important is the ultimate vision. What is it you're trying to accomplish? If your ultimate vision is, look, I want to buy a yacht, okay, maybe. How are you going to do that? Are you adding value to other things, or is it just, I'm going to go out and make as much money as I can so I can buy a yacht and a mansion? Yeah, I'm not investing in that because that's not my area of expertise. Then you have people like your friend who are perhaps very process-driven individuals who have built their entire businesses and built their business acumen on being able to streamline processes. You take the Zara, for example, as Amancio, can't remember his name just off the top of my head, built an entire business out of process and making sure that things ran smoothly. Those guys, yeah, they're going to need a really, really detailed business plan. Steve Jobs, that kind of thought leader, visionary, strategic person, is looking at what's happening in 10 years' time, not necessarily what's happening in the business now. That's why you need the process person and the visionary person to be able to work together to make things work.
That makes a lot of sense. What do you think are some of the key qualities that make a good leader? Like I said, I've heard different people that have had speculations about what a good leader is, and some people might even argue as to who good leaders are. I mean, I've heard even people that are, say, from the right of politics that have said that they felt that Trump was a good leader. But I've also heard that from some people that might be the left of center about Obama. So when you think of the qualities of a good leader, what are some of the qualities that you look for? And do either of those gentlemen, or we can even go on the women's side and say Oprah or Hillary, do they have those kind of qualities of what you consider to be the qualities of a good leader?
So I believe that there are plenty of bad leaders and there are plenty of good leaders. But to me, more often than not, the reason they're a bad leader or a good leader is a little bit less than 50% to do with them and a little bit more than 50% to do with their environment. So if you take somebody, let's say a results-driven leader, let's say somebody who is highly competitive, very goal-orientated, wants to win at all costs, wants to make sure that they're winning and they're promoting, typical kind of financial Wall Street kind of guy, the stereotypical kind of win at all costs, always competing, beating the guy beside him. You take somebody like that and you go, okay, you are a brilliant leader in this environment. We are now going to take you and you are going to run the Four Seasons, high touch, high personal, high affiliation type environment. And that guy is going to burn the place down, both figuratively and metaphorically, in a matter of weeks, because he is the wrong fit for that culture. He's the wrong fit for that environment. Likewise, you take somebody who's high touch and somebody who's spent their whole life in hospitality and making sure that things are done absolutely beautifully and spending a bit of money to make sure that the client has had that amazing experience. And then you thrust them into the world where they have to make cutthroat decisions for hundreds of thousands of dollars in a minute or in a split second on a currency exchange. They're going to have a meltdown and they're going to lose everybody's money because they're not built for it. So for me, the question is not so much what makes a good leader. It's like, who is a good leader for the context that they're leading in? And what stage of that culture are they in? So you could have an environment where right now you need a growth-minded leader, but knowing that once you get to a certain point, what's the milestone we're getting to? Once we get to that point, then we need to start stabilizing. We need to put in a process-driven leader. We need to actually solidify all of that. And then in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, we need another process-driven leader. So we can go in cycles depending on where we are in the organization and what we're planning to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know that your company is, or the website is Aspire and Flourish, and those are two very common words, but a lot of times people don't even think about leadership in those contexts. I'd love to hear you talk about why you think that those are two words that even help you in the structuring of your company. Because, like I said, when you think of Aspire, I think that we pretty much all aspire to do something or another, and of course, we all try to flourish. So they seem like very basic words, but they're also words that definitely are what we're all looking forward to in trying to accomplish. So I'd love to hear even why you use those words in the creation of that particular website.
So I spend a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time going through the Simon Sinek Start With Why stuff, because I spent some time figuring out, look, getting close to 40, this is a couple of years ago, getting close to 40, really want to figure out now what I want to do with the next 20 years of my life. I know what I've done. I know what I've built. I know what I've been able to accomplish. What do I want to do next? That's when I started to distill it. Now, I've actually changed a little bit the Aspire and Flourish. I've actually changed it to Aspire and Empower.
Okay.
But for me, so it basically is my why in any business, in any environment, in any program or association that I want to be in, that I want to get involved in, I want to spend my time and energy doing, has to do one or two of those things and speak to me on that level. I want to help people aspire to a better future and a better career, and then empower them to get there. So to me, aspire is used as a word by a lot of people going, oh, I aspire to be this, I aspire to be that. But people, a lot of the time, I found actually you are using the word wrong. Aspire is actually, in order to aspire to something, you must be moving towards that. It's not a wish, it's not a hope. Aspire is an action. So if you say, I aspire to be the best public speaker in the world, okay, are you doing free speeches? Are you doing free talks? Are you writing talks? Or do you just think, I'd like to do that in the future and I'm thinking about it and thinking about it? If you're just thinking about it, you're dreaming. If you're actually getting forward, no matter how small the steps and no matter how slow you're going, so long as you're moving in that direction, then you are aspiring. So an aspiring actor is somebody who's actually going to auditions. That's the stereotypical. A lot of people, when they put aspiring, they have the word actor or musician beside it.
Right.
If you're an aspiring actor, you're actually going to auditions, you're going, taking classes, doing improv, trying to do new things. Or otherwise, you're just a dreamer. If you're not actually putting yourself out there, you're not aspiring, you're just a dreamer. So for me, the aspire bit is the motivation bit, having a little bit of clarity. What's your personality? What's the kind of culture? What are your biases that you need to work for? What are the types of environments that you're going to thrive in? They're the places that we can move you into. And then with Empower, it's either coaching or training or helping people to understand their own strengths and helping them to go do that.
You know, I was actually talking to a friend of mine. They were actually, was actually two friends, but one friend was doing her live stream show, and I was watching it. And then another friend that also does a couple of these on LinkedIn Live and everything. They were talking about how a lot of our amazing folks that we admire are usually folks that are not what we would consider normal. They definitely think way outside of the box. We can even look at, say, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and we can see how some of them are even thinking about, going to places like Mars and definitely get ready to do these amazing trips and everything. So how much do you think it is important for you to not be what is considered the norm, to kind of like think outside of the box in order to be a truly great leader? And is there any such thing as normalcy within the business context? Because it seems to me that most of the great people that I've heard about in the business context, whether it was like a great scientist like Thomas Edison, or if you're familiar with the African American leader in the science field, George Washington Carver, they were not thinking in the norm. They were thinking outside of the norm. And you can even go back to Isaac Newton and people like that. So I was just wondering how important is it for a leader to be outside the norm and to not necessarily be trying to put the square in the normal place that it would go, anything. I was just wondering how important do you think it is to think outside of the box?
So again, to me, it comes back to the culture of what you're trying to build. So if you look at, let's take Apple as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at Steve Jobs, he and Steve Wozniak, they built that company through creativity. Have I lost you, or am I gone, or are you gone?
I'm here. I'm here.
You're here. Okay, you're frozen. So if you take them, they were thinking differently, and they were running things, creating new ideas, creating and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And then Steve was very much the visionary of the organization, very much the visionary of the company. When he left the first time, then that went with a lot of the problems started to happen in Apple. They were doing too many things. They were losing money. And then when he came back, he instilled a lot of that sense of what's important in the business, and the kind of the cult of Steve was still there, but it was infused within the organization. But if you look at Apple now under Tim Cook was very much a process-driven leader. He had no design experience. He wasn't interested necessarily in spending loads of money on R&D to develop new things that might work or might not work, whereas Steve Jobs was very comfortable with doing that, very comfortable with pushing the boundaries. So we had a visionary, very high energy, highly, supremely focused leader in Steve Jobs. And then after Steve Jobs passed, we have Tim Cook as the leader. Apple has never been more profitable. So it depends on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Are you trying to be a leader to push the boundaries and to grow things and to make a ruckus? Or are you trying to run a very successful company that pays all of the employees? Okay, we'll get into a whole different conversation about workers' rights and everything else. But the company itself is growing, is steady, and is stable. So it depends on what you're actually trying to accomplish, whether you should be thinking outside the box or whether you should be looking at what's the culture, what are we trying to accomplish, who's the best person to accomplish that. Personally, I favor creativity and strategic thinking because that's my personality. That's what my bent is towards. But I know that any operation, any company, any business, or any project that I'm involved in, if my partner is not a process-driven individual, nothing gets done because I am like a box of frogs.
Oh, wow. Box of frogs. Can you be, you actually just raised an interesting question and made me think about it. Can you be an effective leader and also support, say, folks that are underneath you, whether that's workers, whether that's employees, whatever title you want to use for them and everything? Because I'm actually thinking about how here in the United States, we've had a lot of complaint about the fact that it's been, I think, 20 years, or it's been some long time of period since we've actually had a raise in the minimum wage. And some folks would argue that part of that is that if there is a significant raise in the minimum wage, that it will hurt the economy of the businesses, and the businesses will maybe fold or maybe not be able to survive or things of that nature. So that's kind of one of the arguments I think that folks have given for the reason not to do minimum wage, because, if you raise the minimum wage, say for a fast food restaurant and everything, then it may drive some of those restaurants or businesses out of business. But I'm of the opinion that you should definitely try to do things to the benefit of all of the classes. But I was wondering your thoughts on that.
So look, if you look at Henry Ford, kind of the father of the last industrial revolution, really, who kind of revolutionized how things could be done more efficiently. He was a very smart guy, and he raised his salary. He raised the salary of his workers primarily to make sure that his workers were able to afford his cars, so he could sell more. If there was more money in, he could make more products and he could sell more things. I'm not an economist, so I know that there are all kinds of nuances, and the world is a lot more connected and a lot more intertwined. And we have like 2008 crashes where one big thing can happen and then there's a domino effect. My view is we should be looking out for everybody, because we're not here to make money. We're here to make lives better. There's always more money. There's never more time. There's always more money that you can get somewhere, by hook, by crook, legally, whatever way you want to look at it. But there is always, especially in this day and age, there has never been more access to cash for people, but there's never been a greater disparity between all these billionaires you mentioned, who, whether you're into conspiracy theories or not, the fact remains that all of the billionaires are all uniformly trying to get off the planet. So maybe they know something we don't. So, but there's never been a bigger gap, and I think there's a big push now for VAs and having virtual assistants, and the Philippines and kind of Asia seems to be the biggest market for this. And I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs talking about, like, if you don't need somebody in the office, you may as well pay somebody a fifth of the price to go do it elsewhere. To me, that becomes a self-fulfilling negative prophecy, because if there isn't enough money, if all the money is going out there, like a small amount of money is going out there and the rest is going into your pocket, you don't have enough people then to buy your products. Because if the money is not being actually distributed through society, people don't have enough money to buy the stuff that you sell. So ultimately, you're going to not be able to sell anymore. And it's going to be a race to the bottom in everything. And that can only end badly.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. One of the things that we saw during the pandemic, and I think we're still seeing it, is this kind of rush to a new hybrid model of business. So I was just wondering your thoughts about this, where more and more of us are working from home, but also, some of the corporations now want us to come back into the work environment. But it seems to me that whether it's education or whether it's the traditional work environment, that we are going to see more and more of this hybrid model where, you'll spend part of your job day in your house working and part of your job day at whatever that office is, whether that's a traditional office or whether that's a like a doctor's office or whatever the type of office is. But I think that even doctors and teachers are going to be going into this hybrid model of the kind of new form of business. Would you agree with that? Or do you think that this is just because of the pandemic and we're going to go back to the normal way?
No, I think the idea of, I was already starting to really come to the mindset of, why the hell am I making people come in and sit in front of me from 9 to 5? And I'm looking at them, they're talking to their people. I never did that, but I never got the idea of why we were making people come in if they could do their job just as well at home, if they preferred to do it at home. Again, it depends on the culture. My previous business was an ESL school. We taught English as a foreign language. Mm-hmm. We had students from 50 countries around the world fly to Dublin throughout the year to do English language classes with us physically in Ireland. You had to have a teacher physically in that classroom for the time that the students had booked in. You couldn't charge a student to fly from Germany to sit in a class in Dublin while their teacher is on holiday in Fiji. That's like a virtual class. That's not going to work. So there are some environments where, you need people to be there. Distribution, anything physical that is coming in that you're producing that you have to ship out to people, you've got to be in a certain place at a certain time to make sure that gets done. knowledge working, emailing, creative stuff. Why do you have to be chained to a desk? I do think that a lot of people actually miss the interaction and the personal interaction. So I can see a couple of things starting to happen. I can see people working from home, but working from home properly. So right now in the pandemic, everybody was scrambling. They were sharing the kitchen table. They had kind of put their bed and they were using that as a desk. If we're able to actually give our employees a budget and say, look, here's $1,000, get a proper chair, some proper lights and a proper desk, you can actually, people who are renting can go, well, I can move an hour further away, which would be an hour commute, but I get a house that's 3 times the size for the same money that I'm getting. I can work 3 days a week in a dedicated office room that I've set up to be comfortable for myself. And then twice a week, I can go into the office at different times and stagger the times. Everyone doesn't have to be in at 9 a.m. And they can have the water cooler moments. They can have the coffee with people. They can meet their colleagues for lunch and they can go for a drink after work. And then other days, if they want, they might be living in the next town over that takes them 2 hours to get in, and they might feel isolated. So there's probably going to be a WeWork or a Regis or a shared office space where it's not exclusively for my company, but my employee and somebody else's employee and somebody else's employee who all live in the same town can go hang out and talk to each other and have their social bit. I really see that as a future model and as an ideal.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as an ideal and everything. I wanted to get to a little bit of conversation also about your homeland and everything, because I was, I'm always fascinated when I talk to people from different parts of the world. What do you think, other than the fact that everybody from Ireland apparently drinks nothing but Guinness and is always at the bar and everything, but what are some of the other stereotypes that you really wish folks would abandon about Ireland? Because whenever I think of Ireland, that's usually the first thing that people think about is this drinking culture. And of course, they think about the conflict between Ireland and the UK and things of that nature. So what are some of the things that you wish that folks would not have as much of a stereotype about as a native of Dublin?
Well, one of the things you touched on, it's an interesting thing. I'm one of the few Irish people you'll meet that doesn't drink alcohol. Now, since I've kind of hit my late 30s and into my early 40s, whenever I tell new people that I don't drink alcohol, I can see them finishing the sentence with anymore in their head. Like, I had an amazing time in my 20s and 30s, and now I'm not allowed to drink alcohol anymore. That is not the case. I just decided when I was 18, I bought my first car, I started driving and not drinking. And that's a genuinely boring story. I just prefer driving to drinking. When I tell international people that I don't drink, they don't believe that I'm Irish. And when I tell Irish people that I meet for the first time that I don't drink, they don't trust me. So it's a really weird catch-22, and it's about all this bias that you were talking about and these stereotypes. For me, I think, yeah, people in Ireland do drink, but we have this stereotype of drinking a lot and getting a bit rowdy. But I've been in bars with English people, with American people. I've been in bars all over the world. Most people like a drink. The Irish, we do have a bit of a culture of it. Not for short of the fact that up until I think it was the 1800s, Ireland produced, I think it was 85% of the whiskey and rum that was drunk all over the world. We had a massive distilling culture in Ireland. So we were a massive producer of whiskey that was shipped all over the world. There was a massive fire that literally wiped out everything because it was all pure ethanol and alcohol. So all of the factories were all burnt down, and we haven't had the same reputation since. But we are famous for our alcohol.
No doubt about that. The other thing that y'all are somewhat famous for is that conflict that people are like, will it ever end? It's kind of like the Israeli conflict. Will it ever end? But y'all's been going longer. So folks are like, will that conflict ever end, or will it just be going on until we all move to Mars?
Well, so the conflict itself, so there's tension, but there's no fighting, there's no bombing, there's no shooting anymore. That's a past memory, thankfully. There is still tension. There is still Republican nationalists, so the people who believe they're part of the UK, people who believe they're part of Ireland, sharing the same space, and they have different national identities, and that has been embedded for generations. That's very difficult to get out. Funny enough, Brexit and the British people as a whole deciding that they wanted to vote themselves out of Europe that seems to be reigniting this idea of a united Ireland, because there has to be some kind of a border somewhere, whether it's on the island of Ireland or in the waters between the UK and Northern Ireland. So there's a lot of conversation going on at the moment how reunification could happen as a result of Brexit. I don't know. There are all kinds of issues, historical, some baggage, and things that people just need to be able to get over before something like that happens. And it will be a long, long road to walk before we get to that point. But thankfully, there isn't the violence that there once was.
Are you seeing a lot of? I know that definitely Gretchen, and the climate change. The young lady was from one of the European nations. I can't remember which one and everything. But are you seeing a lot of the young people taking the leadership roles in Ireland? Because I know that definitely she was a leader in climate change. Of course, there are a number of young folks that have been leading Black Lives Matter movements here. And I'm actually of the opinion that even though it's 3 or 4 generations from me and everything, because I'm in my late 50s, that some of these younger folks are actually some of the most diverse people and some of the most opinionated, in some ways good opinionated people that I've seen, and are definitely very positive about having positive change in the society. But I was wondering, are you seeing that in Ireland as well, and just around the European nations that you're working with and everything? Because I've been quite impressed with some of the leadership that I'm seeing come from our young folks, even though the downside of that is they're all into social media. And of course, there's that like culture that goes with that. And therefore, that can be a downplay on their mental health. But I am seeing them definitely be very passionate about being inclusive to a large population, whether that's around orientation, around race, around class, around the number of issues that are out there, including the gender divide. But I was just wondering your take on this.
So yeah, I think you're talking about Greta Thunberg there,
right?
The young girl, the young lady, who has been pretty inspirational for a lot of people in Europe. So I think a lot of people in Europe have moved kind of slowly en masse towards being more environmentally friendly and more environmentally aware. So my daughter, for example, is 14, and she volunteers with a local group set up by another 14-year-old and her mother, and they do beach cleanups every weekend up and down Dublin. So they have a couple of people, they spend about 2 hours, and they just pick up trash. They pick up garbage that washes up on the beaches in Ireland, in Dublin. And they have been getting quite a bit of attention of late. They had a deal, a publicity deal now with one of the trash removal companies where they're doing a big social media where they came out, they filmed them, they interviewed the lead girl, Flossie, and are doing a big thing about it and a big push for it. From talking to my daughter, yeah, I mean, I think her generation, like her and her friends, when I think back to when I was 14, how much exposure I had to things like Black Lives Matter, things like Pride, gay rights, this kind of stuff wasn't really top of the agenda. Whereas now there is a real push for some semblance and some sense of equality. And again, it comes back to what's the ultimate vision? Where do you want to live? What's the ultimate BHAG? Where are we going? And can we get there in the way that we're going now? The answer, probably not. We need to make some serious changes about how we treat other people in our society, from different genders, pronouns, orientations, backgrounds, religions, skin color, the whole lot, and to become more inclusive.
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Were you the kid that when you were growing up knew automatically that you wanted to get into this public space of being an entrepreneur, of being a MC for these major entrepreneurship events and being a leader in the community? Or were you the kid that folks would have never put you in this kind of environment? So like I said, if you were the one when you were going to school over there in, I assume, Dublin as well, were you the one that they automatically were like saying, that's going to be the person that's going to be the leader in our community? Or are folks shocked when they now see you and they're like seeing you in this leadership space because that's not what they expected you to be when you were a youngster, either in high school or in college, or some of the other aspects of education that we could go through?
So I have a plaque somewhere or a medal somewhere as being the most improved public speaker in like primary school when I was like 10 or 11 years old. And that's because I said something on stage. Even the first time I just froze and didn't say anything. So I think people seeing me emceeing an event live streamed and with 300 people in the room about this, I think people who wouldn't have seen me since then would be quite surprised that I'm that guy. I've grown up in an entrepreneurial family. I've kind of always known, even before I knew the word entrepreneur, I always knew I wanted to work for myself. I met another entrepreneur a couple of years ago, and he put it better than I could ever put it myself, which is, I'm really bad at managing people and I am unmanageable. So I'm an entrepreneur. I get stuff started and I move on and let other people actually run it. I think I'm probably better at managing other people than he was, but to the same point, I still need process people around me because that's who I am. So I've always known that I was never going to be able to work for other people because just of who I am and how I operate and how I come up with ideas and need that freedom. Public speaking, no, is probably something that I have developed over the years out of necessity, out of interest, and wanting to spend time building it.
Gotcha. Tell us a little bit about the entrepreneurial background that your family gave you and everything, because I know a little bit about that. Because even though I've always had an interest in journalism even before my parents started a radio station, but definitely their starting that radio station when I was a preteen probably has helped my involvement in media. And none of them had an experience in radio. So they were actually those entrepreneurs that saw a need for something and figured, why not them? Meaning that nobody else was doing it, and why not them? And I think Dad, to his credit as well, had a little bit of history with that also. And I'll explain that when I'm saying, as I hear a little bit of your story. But my parents, they had a love of jazz. They also felt that some in the African American community and other minority communities were not being heard. And one of the jazz stations had gone out of business, and some of the stations that exist now had not been created yet, and were not even in people's mindsets at that time. And I don't think that the founders of that stations even knew that that was a thought in their mind at the time that my parents had their idea. Because like I said, the one station was going away, so there was not really a large jazz voice, and they are big jazz fans, and definitely they were not hearing some of the voices of the community being said, so they decided to start a radio station. Like I said, Mom is actually trained as a guidance counselor, even though she's done work in the nonprofit world and philanthropy now. And Dad was trained as I think like a engineer, but like the military type engineer, so like a civil engineer or something like that, but not a radio engineer, and definitely no radio background. But like I said, Dad's mom had started my grandma had started a library in Raleigh, the first African American library, because she didn't see that going on in that community. So she literally knocked on doors to collect money in order to build the library. And this was like in the 40s. So, this was not even the norm back then. And I think she even went to like a predominantly white university in the sense of Columbia and all of that, which was definitely not the norm back in that day and time and everything. So we have some of that entrepreneurship spirit within us is the point I was making. But I was just trying to find out a little bit about your entrepreneurship spirit and where it came from on your family side.
So both of my parents, and my mother grew up on a farm, and she became a teacher. My father grew up in a small town in rural Ireland, the son of the local police sergeant and housewife. He also became a teacher. So they met teaching, but my father then went and studied psychology as well. So he has a real interest in psychology. And then they just took like in the late 60s, early 70s, they took notions and they went off to the US for a bit, and they went off to Saudi Arabia for a bit, and they just traveled, which was, for Irish people, unheard of. Like, even to go to those countries was unheard of, but to give up a solid state pension teaching job. But the two of them, they just knew they had this itch. So they went to Saudi Arabia. My father says that there were 2 power cuts. And he had 2 children, and he was afraid there'd be another power cut, so they came home. So we all came home from Saudi Arabia. So my sister and I were both born there. We came home, and they started their own business. They didn't go back into teaching. They started their own business, and have kind of never looked back. They set up one business in 1981 and then another business in 1989. The 1989 business was the language school, which is what I bought off them 12 years ago and then sold. And then the other business, the original business, I bought off them 5 years ago. So it was important that I always work in the business. So I earned my stripes. I started from the ground up and was doing different things. But then when it came to it, I had my skin in the game. So I had went through the process. Now, I didn't pay market value or anything like that for it. I got a really good deal because I sweet talked my parents. But at the same time, I went through that process of actually valuing the company, getting the finances and all the rest together. So I was taking it seriously. So, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was go ahead and finish your thought.
So I've grown up. I've grown up in an entrepreneurial world. I've always had this idea of the dinner table and the boardroom table are the same table, and having that mix. And in a lot of the businesses that we dealt with, especially for language travel, when people were sending students over, they actually liked the idea that there was a family business. It wasn't some faceless person going, "No, it's 6 o'clock. I'm off the clock." If something went wrong in the middle of the night, one of us gets up and goes to the airport, or goes to the hospital, or goes to the family, or whatever, and fixes it. So I've grown up with that, and I don't really know any other way of doing things other than looking after things because it's yours.
It looks like you are a great lesson that more people need to learn within the American society, and particularly within the minority aspect of the minority society. But that is this concept of generational wealth, because it sounds to me like you have actually learned the true meaning of what generational wealth is. Whereas a lot of groups in America, unfortunately, we kind of like just have this habit of going to a job in order to go to a job and not necessarily thinking of it as a career and something that you pass down and all of that. We've even seen that in our rural communities as well, because unfortunately, a lot of the farmers didn't necessarily in the newer generations pass down the concept of generational wealth, even though historically that was a form of generational wealth, because literally the farms would go from generation to generation. I know that my mom and her sisters have the farm that is, or the land, farmland that is belonged to my grandparents, and it's, if I'm understanding correctly, it's supposed to go down to the generation that I'm part of, and I guess we're supposed to pass it down to the generation that I don't have any kids, but the generation that my nephew is part of, or if I marry somebody and they've got kids, or if I somehow miraculously have one at the age of 60, that it'll get passed down to them and everything.
Hey,
but,
modern medicine, my friend. But
hey, modern medicine is right.
There is, so I actually have a keynote that I deliver on this, and I talk about this a lot. The keynote is build a killer family business without killing your family, because I think there are elements of growing up in a family business that maybe don't get talked about enough, and other things that, again, personality and mindsets on how to actually do this. I've had conversations with many entrepreneur friends of mine, especially when I was researching this and kind of talking about this at the beginning. And I've had a couple of them say to me, like, they were the founder, they were the entrepreneur, and they never thought that they could have a multi-generational business. They thought the business revolves around them and that's it. But once they start to think about the mindsets that I talk about and some of the challenges, some of the things that I want people to start thinking about, they immediately start looking at their kids and going, actually, they could take over this, and I could be able to give them this and allow them to be entrepreneurial with a head start. So it's not ripping their entrepreneurial spirit away from them. And there's different things that you can do to actually ignite that entrepreneurial spirit, as opposed to just handing a business to a kid on your deathbed and going, good luck.
Yep, agreed.
And then they don't value it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. I was just wondering, how successful you think you will be in terms of passing on your entrepreneurship spirit to your child? I think you said you have a daughter. I'm not sure if that's the only child or not.
Two
but
daughters.
Definitely sometimes I think that too often we're too caught up in the fact of we want people to go into the same profession that we've done, and that's not always even their dream sometimes. Like I said, I don't know. Well, my brother works with at-risk youth, so I can't really see him pushing my nephews into that same work. But I do know some folks that are like, the doctor that wants their son to be a doctor, or the lawyer that wants their son to be a lawyer, and maybe the son wants to be a rock musician. So how much of a conversation is that something that you have even in your leadership talks?
So there's two things that I'm going to talk about here very quickly. One is a product that we actually have, which helps people to identify what careers are best suited for them. So that's careerfit.com. It helps people to figure out what's the best career path for them. But when I talk about the family business and succession planning, as the entrepreneur now, ultimately I have to go from the hero of my story to the mentor of the next generation's story. I have to be able to switch that mindset in myself to help to lead that generation. But if I know my daughters don't have exactly the same personality as me, they have similar values, but they have different values because they are their own people. They have different interests. So if they're interested in joining the family business, there is one of the challenges that current generation people have is they want the next generation to join the family business. But my argument is, as the entrepreneurs, we have to make sure that our businesses are ready to join our kids where they are. So we have to spend the next couple of years actually steering our business towards what is going to build them for success, not for them to come in. Because if let's say that you're a process driven leader and they're a visionary leader, or the other way around, you're a visionary leader and they're a process driven leader, they're not going to be able to take over from you. You have to bring the business to where they're going to succeed, rather than trying to bend them to be miserable to take on your vision. It's never going to work.
Yeah, that sounds like that would not work in the least bit. So I agree with you on that and everything. So what are some of the things that you think are the keys to knowing whether you're an entrepreneur or not? Because like I said, some of what you do is entrepreneurship development as well. And I hear quite a few people that think that they're entrepreneurs, but then they're not necessarily have the skill sets to be an entrepreneur. And I think you can be various kinds of entrepreneur. You can be a creative entrepreneur, or you can be more of what I call the product-based entrepreneur and things along those lines. But what are some of the qualities that you see that make an entrepreneur? And just to give some context to it, I remember that a friend of mine, and it actually comes back to what you were talking about earlier with one of your examples, but a friend of mine used to manage one of our local theaters in terms of like being the rental person. And he would have people come in all the time, and they would need to they would say they were promoters or able to be music promoters or concert promoters or theater promoters. And his whole thing was that they were all promoters until it came time for them to cut a check. Then they were no longer promoters, because that was kind of like the thing that separated the true promoters from those that were what you were talking about earlier, which were the dreamers, the folks that had a dream of being a promoter but didn't have the capital to do it and everything. So what are some of the tools that you think a true entrepreneur needs, just like he was saying that the promoters need to have some cash if they were going to actually do a concert?
I think a lot of it really comes down to grit, being able to roll with the punches every now and again, to be able to temper yourself a little bit on the highs, because knowing that this high is possibly not going to last forever, you need to have a certain amount of realism. But it's about, look, if you don't love it, you're going to get knocked back, because life and business is like that. If you don't love it enough, you're going to give up on it. So having that grit, having that tenacity. I personally would argue that there's a huge amount of humility needed to be an entrepreneur, because you're constantly learning. You've always got to be learning. But I've met some extraordinarily arrogant entrepreneurs who have been very successful because of their arrogance, and they just go, oh, shut the hell up. I know what I'm talking about. Get out of my way. So my personality, my values would say humility, but I've seen very successful people, outwardly successful people, because I haven't got to know them very well, because I don't like spending a lot of time with them. But to me, it would be grit and humility will take you extraordinarily far in this world.
Sounds great and everything. And I've definitely thoroughly enjoyed having you on here for about this hour and everything. And yes, I was expecting you earlier, but that's okay. I know how to roll with the punches and everything. But I had told you I would have this conversation for about an hour. But one of the things I get all of my guests to do is share their social media, their outlets, and where folks can reach them. I definitely hope to get you coming back on another edition of the show, whether it's this one or one of my other ones as well. And I always let folks give their words of positivity, their words of encouragement, their words that they would like to share with our global community, because definitely the network does have listeners throughout the globe. Whether I know that Shaquille was on earlier, and he's a investment type out of Australia, and then we've got folks that do shows out of South Africa, Nigeria, and of course around the United States and throughout. And that's just in terms of people that are involved in the shows, much less our fan base. So definitely any words of encouragement and positivity, and how folks can reach you in that social media space.
So I mean, the ultimate thing really is, I guess, from identity to reputation is what are your actual strengths? What not just what you think your strengths are, but what do other people think your strengths are? what do you think your weaknesses are, and what do other people think your weaknesses are, and then that's where you learn and grow. So you can double down on your strengths, you can protect your weaknesses, or you can start to work on your weaknesses. It's entirely up to you. If you're not happy doing what you're doing, do something else. I know it can sound really flippant, and from people who are in a difficult situation, it sounds like a real asshole thing for a white guy to say in Ireland. Oh, just go do something else. But the fact is, we've got one life. You may as well do something you enjoy doing. It might be tough, and it might really suck for a couple of years to take a couple of steps back to get onto the right path that's for you. But ultimately, it's a better place to be. So people can get me through, probably the easiest one for this conversation is successfulsuccession.com, where we help. That's the build a killer family business without killing your family. And yeah, my email is on there, my bio's on there, my social medias are all on there. So Stephen Short from Successful Succession. So all the S's.
That was great, and I'm sure that folks will be doing that. We have folks that watch what my friend Brian calls team replay, in addition to watching whatever folks are watching live. And I did see on LinkedIn that we did have some folks that were liking and putting their little check marks and everything. So definitely there are folks over there as well. So definitely glad to have you. Glad that we were able to have that initial conversation, and hopefully get you back on, because I'm definitely enjoying your perspective and everything. So definitely always an amazing guest, and hope to see you come back on at a near time. As a matter of fact, I've got to jump on Mullins, where I've got another international person that has been about the world of peace and all of that. So if you have time and you want to jump on over on the rest of our conversation, we can do that as well. But if not, and I know that you're a busy man, I would love to have you come back on at another time as well. But definitely always great having some amazing conversation, and glad that we are now connected globally, because this is definitely a global world, and we're seeing more and more of us that are developing friendships throughout the world. So I now consider you to be one of my global brothers and all of that. So definitely look forward to having more conversations with you.
My pleasure, Mark. Great to talk to you.
Sounds great.
Have a good day.
That wraps up this edition of the radio show with Mark Lee, and I've actually got to get ready to go over to Mullins and Music and Memories. As I've told Stephan before, Mondays is my crazy day, where I do like about 3 or 4 podcasts all back to back to back and all of that. So I'm getting ready to jump off of the radio show and head on over to Mullins. But who knows? Maybe Stephan will join me over there. But if not, we'll definitely catch him on a later time as well. But right now, get ready to wrap everything up. And it's been another amazing episode of Radio Show with Mark Lee. And I look forward to seeing y'all again here next Monday at 2 o'clock.